Tonight, on True Crime Talk, the Mad Butcher is an unidentified serial killer who murdered several men in Fayette County, West Virginia, a state noted for its mountains and rolling hills. The exact origin of the name the Mad Butcher of West Virginia is unknown, but the nickname was spread from the media and public in the early 1960s in response to a series of unsolved murders in the Oak Hill area. The name was given because authorities never found whole bodies, only pieces, leading to the gruesome nickname. Tonight on True Crime Talk, we look back on some of the victims, the murders, and the crime scenes that they say were the evil work of the Mad Butcher. Welcome to True Crime Talk. No guests this week. We have, of course, with us Carolyn and Brian. Glad to be with the both of you this evening to talk about something that is very much a true mystery. This time of year, we often find ourselves talking about things that may be considered folklore or legend or potentially real-life horror stories. And what we have on tap for tonight is very much all of that wrapped up into one big story. Now, what is not folklore and what is not complete made up and fiction is this is a story that is filled with real life victims, people that had families, loved ones, and when they went missing or otherwise, there has been a lot of pain and sorrow due to that. So while we will try to have a little fun with our conversation tonight due to the nature of the overall encompassing idea, we're also going to keep in mind that to be respectful of the victims and their families and to tell their stories the best that we can, because we are talking about a story that primarily takes place in the early 1960s in the great state of West Virginia. So we are relying on the reporting that was done at this time. In some of these cases, unfortunately, we're talking about situations where there is no one left to tell these stories, nobody that was around at the time with a great understanding of these stories. What we have for you tonight, we're talking about the Mad Butcher of West Virginia. And again, this could be myth, could be legend, could also be very, very real. And what is very real is the victims that we will be discussing tonight. And there are several men from different walks of life that have been suspected to be a victim of the Mad Butcher of Fayette County, West Virginia. We have several gentlemen to talk about this evening, and the first one that we will be talking about is the disappearance of a man named Esker Ernest Gwynn.
He had a nickname of Slick. This one there was not lots of information on, and the few things that I found were a little contradictory. But Ernest, or better known as Slick, was a 76-year-old retired railroad worker. Went missing July 3rd, 1962. He was 5'9", 170 pounds, gray, balding. At the time, he lived in I think they called it a boarding house, which was also called the Old Virginian Hotel. Reported last time he was saw, again, there's like two different news stories. One was that he was last seen at the landlord that owned this Old Virginia Hotel also had a diner called the 4-Minute Lunch, which was in Oak Hill. So he was once reported last seen there, but there was another news outlet that reported he was last seen at the Veterans of Foreign Wars Club, and he was actually kind of hanging or associating with three younger men. Then there was also arguments back and forth. The person at the Veterans of Foreign War said, no, we never saw him there. So that was kind of interesting. And also apparently around that date, either that day or the day before, he had cashed his pension check. So I don't know if that meant he had a decent sum of money on him. Later on, they found, in May of 63, they found a skull with a bullet hole in it. May 28, 1963, near Thurmond. and it's believed that that is his skull. The problem is that when they even tried to look at some dental records, the dentist at the time had destroyed his records, so not really a very good identification could be made.
What is odd here is we're going to see some consistencies and inconsistencies when we go through these different victims here. And the consistencies are with maybe last places that they have been confirmed to have been seen. Also, even some similarities in the disappearances themselves. But yeah, Brian, like you're saying, in this case, it's there's several different websites that have set up and provided for us a short description of the different victims and how they went missing and the outcome, if and when their bodies were found. And what I found is what I believe you guys found as well, that when you go digging on this one, it's a lot of these little one-page dedications to these victims, sharing a lot of the same information, and it gets difficult to carry the story further with a lot of these different gentlemen. You said a couple of things that I know to be true to be mentioned in the disappearances of these other guys. One, Oak Hill seems to be something that is often discussed, this general Oak Hill area, West Virginia. Also the time period, because we're going to be talking primarily about the early 60s. And then here, this is at least the second, if not the third time that I've heard this business, the 4-minute lunch.
Yep.
That comes up again and again.
Yep.
And this seems like a very popular place in this Oak Hill area.
It also makes me wonder, I mean, without trying to pull up a map of how many other eating establishments were around. It may have been the only diner. So maybe it was really the only place to go. But I definitely like a 4-minute lunch. That's quick.
In May of 1963, a skull with a bullet hole was located by railroad workers that is believed to be, as you said, believed to be Ernest Gwynn.
Mm-hmm.
Difficult to determine age based on the lack of remains. The time of death was approximated to have been 10 months prior. So if it's him, if it's not him, we're talking about full decomposition here. It's going to be very difficult, especially given the time, to determine who some of these folks are. That's another consistency that we will see with some of these cases. And that disappearance takes place in the middle of 62. I had found something somewhere where he was not so quick to be reported as missing.
Yes.
A lot of these folks were reported to the state police to be missing. And he, because of the holiday, right? He's last seen, as you said, July 3rd. He cashed that pension check. I'm glad that you pointed that out, because this note I have here is that he was going to be paying his rent for the month.
Yeah, which I guess he was very always on time with his rent. And I think I even read something too, that the reason why he wasn't reported missing so quick is because the landlord just assumed he went to go maybe visit his sons.
Yeah, and that's what I had heard too with the holiday, with the 4th of July holiday right there, that several folks just assumed, well, maybe he went somewhere for the holiday, or he was out, he would be celebrating and be gone for several days.
Mm-hmm.
But it stands to reason that if they know that he cashed his check, that he would have been walking with some potentially heavy pockets that day. And if somebody knew that or was keeping an eye on him, this motive for his disappearance, murder, would be to empty those heavy pockets and potentially to rob this old man. I believe you said he was 76.
Yeah, so he was kind of thin, not very tall, and older. So, I mean, if you're a younger guy and you're looking for a mark, it would probably be someone like that. And if the one story is true that he was at the foreign affairs place having some drinks, who knows if he pulled his wallet out and they see, whoa, I don't know what his pension check was, but a couple $100 back in 63 was a lot of money.
So he's on the older end. Is he the oldest of these victims we have here?
I think so, Carolyn.
Yeah, he was born in 1887. So to be that age in 62, you have to be very healthy, very healthy.
He's seen some stuff.
Yeah.
Especially
working in World War I.
Especially working on a rail yard or railroad. That had to have been he probably had some stories.
Moving forward, let's keep in mind 4-Minute Lunch and also the Veterans Foreign Affairs Club. And that, if I am on task here, boys and girls, correct me if I'm wrong, but that brings us to Sammy Smith.
Yes.
1962.
That's right. And 4-Minute Lunch comes up again. Sammy Smith was a migrant farm worker from Scarborough, West Virginia, which is about 7 miles away from Oak Hill. He was 33, and after traveling for the season, he had just returned back home and taken a job as a dishwasher at the 4-Minute Lunch. So on the night of October 20th, he finishes his shift around midnight. They think he hitched a ride to the Top Hat Drive-In, where someone saw him grabbing a cup of coffee. He was a smaller guy, about 5'8", with black hair and hazel eyes. And about 20 minutes after he grabbed this coffee, around 12:20 a.m., another customer reported seeing him walking in the direction of Scarborough, likely heading home. So whether he was going to hitchhike again, we don't know. And that's the last time anyone ever saw him. A few days later, when he didn't return home, his mother reported him missing. His case remains unsolved, and his remains have never been found to this day. And that's about all I could find on Sammy Smith. There's just not a lot that I could find out there.
Even so, with these more recent missing person cases, there's, unfortunately, a lot of times there's not a lot of story there when it comes to the day and time of leading up to their disappearance. And that is the nature of that story. And it will be, because they wouldn't be missing if we knew what happened to them, right? I know it sounds dumb to say that, but sometimes you have to speak these things so that people can simply understand. We would love to tell you what the last thing he was known to have been doing, but then that would probably give us some really good leads onto whatever happened to this poor man, Sammy Smith. And the short, sad answer of it is that they just don't know, and may have never had any really good leads as to what may have happened to this man. And that's another theme that you may see with some of these other thought to be victims of the Mad Butcher of West Virginia. Michael Rogers, this story is significantly different than the first two.
Absolutely.
With the exception that this is also 1962. There is a lot more information out there about his personal story, and you will see why, whether correctly or not, the term Mad Butcher gets tossed into the whole mix here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Mike Rogers, he was a 19-year-old male. Many sources had him listed that he was a mentally handicapped ward of the state, but no specific diagnosis or anything, but just basically listed that he was mentally handicapped. So he lived with foster parents on Salem Road. They had him listed at, here they call him a large size. So he was 5'10", 215 pounds. But most people thought he was pretty docile, I guess, and not very aggressive and mean. But around, I think it was around 5 o'clock, December 19th, 1962, he told his foster mother he was heading to Salem Market to buy some cigarettes. And he also noted that if that market was closed, he would then walk to Oak Hill, which we talked about before, and then return home. Most of this involved walking and hitchhiking, which is also a theme throughout these, as hitchhiking was pretty much the standard back then. Based on some witness accounts, Mike was last seen on Main Street in Oak Hill around 6 p.m. in the passenger side of a station wagon with Ohio license plates. And again, Mike was reported to hitchhike quite often. He was reported missing, but his body was not found until December 27th, 1962, which was 8 days later. There was a young boy at the time. He was out looking for bottle caps, I believe, and that's who discovered his body. Mike's body had been dismembered into 13 pieces. So they had found his head inside a plastic bag, and then the left section of his torso, and they listed as his rump, were found in a military duffel bag, also with several organs in that same military duffel bag. The cause of death they determined at the time to be an execution-style gunshot wound to the head with a .22 caliber bullet, whether it be a rifle or handgun. It appears he was shot in the back of the head while kneeling, hence the execution style. It was also reported that all of the dismemberment was done post-mortem. Now, there was some interesting stuff I found that when they found this military duffel bag, they were trying to figure out who it was. So they ended up tracking it back to an owner that was a man that lived in Michigan. He had stated at the time that he had lost it on a Greyhound bus somewhere between Michigan and South Carolina in 1950. So when they found this man, actually approached him or talked to him, they found a bloody axe, bloody knife, and hacksaw in his car, which obviously when you see that, you're like, whoa, what's going on there? Which he claimed were just tools used for butchering animals. So I find that quite interesting. The suspect, I never could find his name anywhere. He was never charged with any charges or murder. But the one interesting fact is it was later determined that this suspect, the guy they found, actually ended up killing himself after turning himself in, stating he didn't want to hurt anyone. And that's literally all it said.
It didn't say if he admitted to this or something else. Huh.
Yeah. I mean, it was very vague. I mean, it even didn't even say, like, why did he even turn himself in? But ultimately committed suicide in stating, I don't want to hurt anyone. So that's like they kind of just threw that out yet in one of these articles. I'm like, that's some interesting information. Who is this person and what do they have in police files on this guy? But that's unfortunate for Mike Rogers.
So this is from killerscrawlspace.wordpress.com. So here's one thing that I found in relation to this Mike Rogers murder. It says one man in 1964, it was a gentleman. I don't know. Let's not throw around terms here. Let's say what we mean and mean what we say, because if this guy did what he said, he is far from it. Yes. So one man in 1964 was named Hugh Montgomery.
Oh, you did find a name.
That was arrested at a local hospital. He would go into the hospital demanding that they hire him as a doctor. And when they told him to get out of there, he would come back with a sledgehammer and start breaking stuff.
Sheesh.
The police would find 3 guns, a knife, duffel bag, and a meat grinder in his car/house. He had gone to medical school for 1 year. Apparently anybody can get in, and was in the Air Force as a physician. He did admit to several murders, but made a point that he was not the Mad Butcher. He said people were after him and he had killed them in self-defense. I mean, this sounds of schizophrenia, screams of it. It was reported he was in Ohio at the Air Force Base at the time of the disappearance/murder of Mike Rogers. So Mike Rogers' name comes up, but it seems like they seem to think that this mad doctor of Ohio had an alibi, and he was at the Air Force Base. And it says the man was from the area in Fayette County due to his wealthy family. When he was arrested and sent to a hospital to be examined, it was reported he was diagnosed as being paranoid/homicidal with homosexual tendencies. And later he bounced around from mental hospitals for several years. And according to a book, well, we need to find out what book what book it was stated 5 torso murders happened in the areas that he was in. And then the website says, was he the murderer, though?
Is this the same guy for sure that they traced the duffel bag to that Brian was talking about, or this could be somebody else?
It could be somebody else, because with the duffel bag, I thought that there was some kind of Michigan connection with the duffel bag.
Yeah, so the guy actually said the owner was a man living in Michigan at the time.
Okay.
So it didn't, and I think he actually might even have worked with Greyhound at the time. So I don't know if that fits with someone that was a doctor and in the Air Force. So it might be two separate people.
Yeah, I thought that the Michigan man who was mentioned, while his story is mentioned, that his name, I couldn't find his name in that one. So I think they may be talking about two different people.
Which is still very wild, though, that both of these potential suspects are being brought up. Wow.
Yeah. And Air Force pops up again with the military duffel bag. That's interesting.
Which I wonder, too, though, back then, those were probably pretty common bags to carry your stuff around. I mean, you didn't have a lot of options, especially maybe in poorer areas. It was just like, hey, what do you need? I need one of those duffel bags.
Maybe that's why they never traced it.
Curious to see what the enrollment numbers would be, percentages anyway, compared to back then compared to today.
Yeah, especially in that area. If your options were coal mining, railroad, or Air Force.
Yeah, and you're one generation removed from the greatest generation? Mm-hmm. And that was considered to be your patriotic duty, and you were a hero. And so, I mean, you're not far removed from that. I would have to guess if you were going to ask me to make a wager, I would bet that the enlistment numbers, I should say, were much higher back then, percentage wise, than they are today. So this is weird because this is from a newspaper that is dated December 12, 1963. So our Mike Rogers went missing, the previous December
19th,
1962, correct?
Yeah, and he was found 8 days later.
Okay, so this article is from roughly a year later, and the headline is Mad Butcher Case Report. And I'm just going to read a portion of it. It is longer than this, but I'm going to read a portion of it because it seems to talk about some kind of evidence here. The evidence was found at or near the spot near Pineville on Route 16, where the torso of a white adult male minus the head, both arms and both legs, was found wrapped in a canvas tarp. The sheriff said stains on a tablecloth found about 5 miles from Pineville had been definitely determined to be human blood, possibly type O. Whether it matches the blood of the corpse is yet to be determined. The officer said strands of hair found clinging to the cloth were analyzed and found to be from the head of a person with light hair, which had been dyed dark brown. Phillips is the sheriff. He goes on to say, testing on the rest of the material sent to the Capitol has not been completed. The Wyoming authorities sent, in addition to the cloth, the tarp in which the lower part of the man's body was wrapped, and which also contained straw and sand and a piece of bone about the size of a quarter. The Fayette County authorities met Tuesday afternoon in Pineville to discuss the possible link between the body found in Wyoming County Saturday and the butchered body of Michael Rogers.
Yeah, and I think what you're describing, Nick, is a lot of the same information for someone we'll get to down the road is Shirley Jean Arthur.
Okay. And they go on to say investigations into both murders showed that both victims were discovered without clothing. Both bodies were clean with little blood. Both were dumped along heavily traveled highways, and that both were left along curves in the road, making them visible to traffic, especially to headlights at night. Phillips said it appeared the persons responsible wanted the victims found.
So the victims here are one Mike Rogers and then two Shirley Jean Arthur.
I mean, when we get to him, a lot of the stuff Nick read is very similar. So I'm assuming that's who they're possibly hinting at.
Okay.
Yeah, and so what they're referencing here, guys, is that this article is from mid-December 63, and they're talking about a body that was found just days prior.
Okay. Gotcha.
Oh, gotcha.
Oh, how about this, Carolyn? How much do you think you would have to pay for a newspaper back in 1963?
Oh, how much?
Guess. You have to guess.
25 cents.
I'm going with 3 cents.
Ooh. We'll call it the middle. 7 cents would buy you the...
Well, I'm way over. I'm not going to
7
win the
cents.
Price is Right.
You're one of those fancy kids. So, yeah, this is... If the same individual or group of individuals are responsible for the first 2 disappearances that we've already discussed, now when we get to Michael Rogers' disappearance and then the horrific way that his body is found, now you can see why this whole Mad Butcher title moniker comes into play.
Yes.
And this naturally today, if this happened, there would be rumors, there would be people talking around the water cooler, people coming up with all kinds of fanciful stories about who the murderer is. And the longer that they go unidentified, the crazier those stories get. And one thing that is just absolutely natural human nature is you start to think that a lot of this stuff is connected. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm not saying that people were off their rockers. I'm just saying that is human nature. Who's to say what cases are connected to this? But what we do know is while it's questionable if that was Slick Gwynn that we found with the bullet in the back of the head, and then we have Sammy Smith, never found, never heard of again. But then we have this poor Michael Rogers, who sounds like, if we're going to throw around the term gentleman, it sounds like he should have been referred to as a gentleman, and he ended up in a real bad way. What do the two of you think about this air quotes friend? Because I've seen a different telling of this. He approached a friend asking for a ride when he was in the company of that vehicle with the Ohio plates.
Yeah, I couldn't find who the friend was.
Yeah, in some tellings of this story, the friend's like, oh, yeah, Mike needed a ride, but he looked like he wanted to get out of there real quick, and he looked like he was probably scared, and I had some errands to do, and I was like, I'll come back and get you, and I came back, and he wasn't there. Like, when I hear anybody say that they encounter a friend of theirs and they're saying he looked scared and I left and came back and he wasn't there, I'm always very, very suspicious of that person. I would love to have found his name.
And that person then would have been local to all of these, which this Oak Hill seems like a small town to me for such a short time period, all of these men to disappear or wind up dead.
Yeah, I mean, we already have 3 victims in the course of, 6 months.
Well, a local person would make some sense.
Yes, absolutely. Hill, West Virginia, is in Fayette County, West Virginia. The population as of the 2020 census is 8,179 people.
Wow. So imagine what it was back in the 60s.
And it makes sense. It says here that it's part of the Beckley metropolitan area, which some of the newspapers that I've looked at are out of Beckley.
Okay, so that would be a more populated area, but this was maybe a small town nearby.
It's not super small when I'm looking at it here. 1960 to 1970, 4,700 people. Not crazy small, like 200 people or anything like that. I think that's a good amount of folks. I'm assuming, given that number, that there's more than one place to have lunch. This leads us to yet another victim.
Another victim, and it leads us back to the 4-minute lunch all over again. Lou Lewis Bennett was 42-year-old coal mining operator and a World War II vet. On the evening of July 27th, 1963, he left home around 5 o'clock on foot to visit some friends. At some point, he eventually ends up at the 4-minute lunch. According to a female witness, Lou sat at the counter chatting and drinking beer. And the things he said were a little dark, ominous, maybe even foreshadowing what was about to happen. Lou had recently been diagnosed with a fatal kidney condition, though the details are unclear, and it had really taken a toll on him. He was depressed and even mentioned that he wanted to disappear somewhere no one would see him again. He ordered a 6-pack to go and left the 4-minute lunch, presumably heading home. Someone reported seeing him along the railroad tracks, beer in hand, making his way towards his house, but he never got there. The next morning, when Lou didn't show up, which was completely out of character for him, his wife reported him missing. And that was it. He just vanished. It wouldn't be until almost 2 years later, on May 19th, 1965, that a group of kids playing near some remote railroad tracks in Minden, West Virginia, stumbled upon a human skull. Searching down the ravine further, they found clothing, including a unique belt with the letter B on it. Lou's family confirmed the items were his. And that's all we know. We don't know what really happened to Lou Bennett. Many think he took his own life, overwhelmed by this grim diagnosis, but his family never believed that. They believe he could be the victim of a serial killer.
Yeah, I want to say there was one, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it's somebody we haven't got to yet, but I saw somewhere that one of these victims was suspected, and it sounds like Lou would fit this. You said he had a diagnosis, and yeah, I reviewed somewhere that it was suspected that he committed suicide by dynamite, which
seems
like
that.
An interesting choice.
Well, my first thought was, if he's that close to train tracks, did he just lay down on the train tracks?
Yeah, and I've reviewed...
But they did find some clothing. Would that be intact with dynamite or a train? And the
Good
belt
point.
where they could make out the letter B? I don't know.
That's a good point.
I would think that it would be more likely to have some of the clothing if it were the train rather than the dynamite.
Yeah, because you'd think there'd be burn marks and things on it.
So I've reviewed several train cases over the years, and one thing that is consistent in all of them, and there's no really nice way to say this, is those people were always in a whole bunch of pieces. Like when I hear of somebody getting hit by a train, I just always assumed it was similar to like a car, right? Like something speeding comes and boom, there's impact, and you either fly from that impact or you're knocked over and then run over. And that can be the case, but I think the manner that the train, and because it's so heavy, the way that it runs, and they actually have a term for it, the engineers and such, they call it pass over. They say that the train passed over them. And I think that it kind of just tears you apart and spreads you around.
So that would be consistent with this, that his skull was found one place, his remains were found down the ravine, his clothing was found kind of spread out.
Well, especially since they didn't find him for a good, God, it was almost 2 years later, that who knows if animals and stuff got involved and made it even more of a mess.
Animal degradation, they will play with the body. They will do things with the body. It's part of the cycle of life, especially as far as they're concerned.
I'd be curious how rural this area is where these kids were playing if it took 2 years to find this. You know what I mean? I mean, that's a long time.
And didn't kids find remains with one of the other victims we just talked about?
Yeah, Mike Rogers, a kid, was looking for bottle caps and found them.
Yeah, that's right.
So again, maybe if we're talking about a small town, there wasn't anything for kids to do, so they just be like, I'm going to take off and wander around.
There was no Nintendo Switch.
Nope.
You had to go out and look for bottle caps and bodies. So here we go. This, again, from that website earlier that I had mentioned, Killer's Crawl Space. It says, we don't believe Lou Bennett was a victim of the Mad Butcher. It could still be possible, but because it said it could still be possible because suicide by dynamite would be a rather harsh way to go. Yeah. Suicide by dynamite is not common.
No.
If I don't, I've reviewed a lot of cases. I can't recall one where somebody chose dynamite. As Carolyn said, stepping in front of the train, much more common.
But with his being a coal mining operator, he may have access to dynamite a lot easier than the average
That's a good point.
Joe. I mean, also, I don't know, back in the 60s, can you just go to Tractor Supply and be like, give me some dynamite, buddy? I mean, I don't know if that was normal, but I mean, being in a coal mining, you'd think they'd have that stuff around. I mean, I'm sure they probably use that daily, which is also another thing of, you would think if he's in a rural area and then you hear a huge boom, I mean, maybe that's normal for the coal mining areas where we just randomly hear booms because of their blasting.
Coal mining operator is how he's described on this other website. Doesn't that, I don't know, I'm not going to pretend to know anything about coal mining. My extent of knowledge of coal mining is the old horror flick My Bloody Valentine, where they keep going down into the coal mines and people are getting slaughtered in that slasher film. But World War II veteran, I don't know. It just makes all the story that much more sad for me when I hear these guys that served this great country and they died these mysterious deaths or they went missing. But also coal mining operator sounds less to me like a laborer. It sounds like a more prominent position.
But then if that was the case, would he be walking home?
Right. This website says something about his kidneys. Fatal ailment regarding the kidneys, but was not confirmed.
Yeah, they never name it.
Mm-hmm.
Left the 4-minute lunch, presumably heading home. If there is a Mad Butcher, if they're serial killer, whatever you want to call the perpetrator of these disappearances and Michael Rogers' horrific murder, it would appear there's some direct tie to this 4-minute lunch. You're almost scoping out the joint, watching for a potential victim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's odd that it comes up that number of times. That's the last sighting of several of these guys.
Who wants to tell us about the rock and roller, Shirley Jean Arthur? Who
that's right up my alley, buddy.
Yeah, that's right.
Shirley Jean Arthur, when he disappeared, he was a 39-year-old male, disappeared in November of 1963. So they're kind of vague on the specific date. He was last seen hitchhiking. There's a couple different stories on who last saw him. One of them was he was last seen after visiting his girlfriend in Pineville, West Virginia. But it also had been described in a different newspaper article that he was last seen leaving the home of Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, where they were having like a church choir practice. So I don't know if maybe he went from one place to the other, but it reads two different ways. The Taylors said that he had left their house around 11 p.m. and was hitchhiking back towards Beckley, but maybe he went to his girlfriend's house. So he was last seen wearing brown khaki pants, what they call a print T-shirt. I don't know what that means. And it's either dark brown or heavy black winter jacket. He had been enlisted in the United States Navy, like we mentioned before, but he was AWOL at the time, approximately 2 weeks. They listed him as 5'9", 160 to 165 pounds. So apparently everybody in this area is 5'7" to 5'9". He was reported that this is going to be important later. He was reported to smoke between 2 and 3 packs of cigarettes a day. So he was going to town on those darts there. So later on, a torso was discovered by 3 teenage boys. This was December 7th, 1963. This was near Pineville, West Virginia.
That would match up with the article that I read earlier. Yeah, where they mentioned Pineville.
The head, arms, and legs were missing from the torso. The torso, which this I think was very interesting, the torso contained 19 puncture wounds in like a circular pattern around the heart. I think it was even speculated that they maybe thought someone did this with like an ice pick to simulate wounds that might look like a shotgun. Like, like bird shot, how it would kind of spray out and leave little holes. There had also been reports that the body might have been held in some type of cold storage because it was notably still thawing at the time of discovery. Now, the flip side is I don't know how cold it was in West Virginia in December, if it would have froze it, but I think that's quite interesting that they could figure that out.
That seems, I'm with you. That seems strange given that, I'd have to look up the weather report for that December in West Virginia, but we share a very similar climate than West Virginia, and the nights are very cold, if not freezing, in Ohio in December.
Yep. Yeah. So it could be possible.
He could be freezing and thawing daily, essentially overnight.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned from that other article, Nick, they found a bloodstained tablecloth approximately 5 miles from Pineville. Also found was a tarp, which inside that tarp was a man's lower part of his body. And then inside that tarp, they had found straw and sand, possibly indicating that he had been in or around a barn or outbuilding. Also inside that tarp, they found a piece of bone like the size of a quarter, which they indicated possibly meant the body had been sawed, which hence going back to removing limbs and such. So when they had this torso, they did an autopsy on it, and it said the lungs of this torso were clean. Here's how they worded it: appeared clean, indicating the victim was not a coal miner and not a smoker. So that already kind of goes against what we heard about Shirley Jean Arthur, who said that he smoked, 2 to 3 packs of cigarettes a day.
So we don't know if it's him. That was never really...
No.
It's very unclear. Okay.
Yes. And then one of the other stories had listed that when he left his girlfriend's house, she had given him an apple. And so inside the torso, they had found an apple. So I think that's why they maybe jumped to, well, maybe this is him because we found an apple in the stomach of his torso. But again, the lungs don't match up. I wouldn't think a guy that was almost 40 years old and smoking 3 packs of cigarettes, they would be able to clearly tell those are some dark lungs. But yeah, to this day, it says the torso has not been properly identified. It's actually buried in Wyoming County Cemetery with the inscription Mr. X.
Does it say how long he was missing before they found this torso?
Yes. Well, we don't know the actual date because it just says he disappeared somewhere in November, and then he was found December 7th. So, it could have been up to a month. It could have been a month before he was actually found.
I'm a little confused by the scene where the body's discovered with the tarp saying that, we're talking about just a torso here. And we're saying that it's just the lower portion was covered by the tarp, or was he severed?
So inside the tarp was the lower part of a man's body, and they don't really go into specifics. So I don't know if that means like legs or just like the bottom part of the torso. Like, I don't know if the torso was cut in half. It doesn't really give much information. Just they actually worded it as lower part of man's body was wrapped inside the tarp. And then inside that tarp is when they found the straw, sand, and some bone pieces.
And I can't remember. Dissected would be the lay term for it, but there is a term for when you separate the lower portion of the torso from the top portion of the torso. And I believe I only know that from the Elizabeth Short Black Dahlia murder, still unsolved out in California. And bisected, I think it's bisected is the term.
Sounds good.
And in review of that case, the expert opinions in the Elizabeth Short case is that some say that it would take a great deal of surgical experience and knowledge to be able to perform that bisection. And then there's others that say, no, you could a person with some general butcher experience could probably figure it out. And I know that the human body is much different than what I'm about to go into. So laugh at me if you will, but every year I carve a turkey, and in the moment I figure it out every year. It's not like I remember exactly how to do it. And of course I've gained some experience over the years, but the first time I did it, I did a really damn good job and had never done it before with no, I didn't watch a YouTube video. Nobody showed me how to do it. You just you can feel your way around and go, all right, I can cut here and it will be easily removed from the larger piece.
Yeah, I don't know if comparing a turkey to a human body, but I know where you're going with it, Nick.
It's not a great idea, but I mean, if take your hand and reach around to your own back and you can feel between the vertebrae.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other thing, I remember with the Black Dahlia case, they were saying those cuts were very surgical, but we don't really get any of that information here. It just says the limbs were removed. So I don't know if they were just, ripped off or sawed off, and they don't really ever mention anything about surgical.
And I think the big difference we have when you compare the Black Dahlia case to these cases that we're talking about here today is the amount of time. Right. Time is always the killer. Time is the killer of evidence. Time is the killer of these remains that are found. Elizabeth Short was found relatively quickly after her body was placed where it was found. I mean, because somebody just placed it on the corner of a neighborhood, purposely putting it on display for everybody to see, for shock and awe. And here it looks like a lot of these bodies are being found and had been in that where they were placed or where they were left for a considerable amount of time. And if any of these folks died by accident or suicide, their bodies happen to go unnoticed for a considerable amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, plus out in the elements for days, weeks, months. Could be snow and, like you said, heat and cold and all that other stuff.
But in this case, there was some attempt to cover it up, some attempt with a tarp.
Yeah, it just kind of said it was in there, so I don't know if it was covered over it or just kind of wrapped up and tossed. I mean, it again doesn't go into a lot of detail if it was attempting to conceal it or not.
And it was in the woods somewhere, in the woods where these kids were walking around and found it.
Yeah, I had read that they were actually looking for firewood, so yeah, you would think they would be looking near trees.
Circling back to the gentleman Slick Gwynn.
Mm-hmm.
This one's weird. This newspaper article says that his name was Edward E. Gwynn. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But circling back to Gwynn, this article is talking about the skull that was found. Okay, Fayetteville County Sheriff Elmore said his department had reason to believe the skull was pierced through the center with a hole apparently made by a .25 caliber weapon.
Okay.
And that was the skull of, it says believed to be the skull of Gwynn.
Yeah, and I think part of that was, I guess he had teeth removed, and this skull was missing some teeth. So they might have just jumped to that conclusion. But remember, they couldn't confirm it because they didn't have the dental records.
Yeah, and the county coroner in this article saying that it's believed that whoever they found with this bullet hole had been dead for about a year. So I wonder if they're just simply lining up the time frame of, well, this guy had been missing for 6 months or what have you, and we're piecing it together this way.
Mm-hmm.
So that could leave the possibility there are other victims that we don't know their names. This is just who we know disappeared or was murdered. But if the remains belong to someone else who was also murdered, there could be other unnamed people,
absolutely,
unnamed victims.
Today, they would be able to sort out and approximate the age of the remains that they're finding, probably considerably better than they could in the early 60s.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, plus if we're talking rural West Virginia, how hard are the doctors really trying on this stuff? And did they even have the knowledge and skill base to even do that?
Yeah, the picture I see here of Shirley Jean Arthur, he's got a guitar in the left hand, and he's got kind of his hair, dark hair slicked back. He's got his collar up. Yeah,
which
this
would
is
be
a dude
interesting.
we would hang out with, Brian. This was a dude that
he was a rocker. He's got his collar flipped up, and I know you mentioned that article. The hairs they found were dyed hairs, so I wonder if he maybe he dyed his hair to keep that younger look.
Well, so part of the article that I didn't read because it sounded, look, I'm not trying to laugh or have a good time at the expense of whoever's body that was found, but they spent a good amount of the article explaining that the missing man was known to have dyed his hair or believed to have dyed his hair, especially shortly before he went missing. But then they also spend a good amount of time talking that, the head was never found. But just those, right. Just the hair there was some hairs that were found. It could be anybody's hairs, but the hair was found. Good point. It was believed that the hair was dyed. You know what makes sense? So I'm looking at this picture of this man, and it said that one of the articles that I reviewed said Shirley Jean Arthur had light hair. And in this picture, it looks dark. Like he's trying to get his Elvis on, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Even though it's black and white, but yeah, it looks dark.
We still have more victims to discuss. We have Sergeant James Lee Haynes. This is another gentleman that served this great country and makes this story all the more sad. I'm going to go straight from the Wix articles website, Cold Case Crew, wixsite.com. Sergeant James Lee Haynes, December 7th, 1963. On the same day that the torso was discovered along Indian Creek, yet another person mysteriously disappeared. Sergeant James Lee Haynes had hitchhiked down from Baltimore, Maryland, to visit his family in West Virginia. After returning home from a tour abroad, he planned on catching a ride back home to Maryland with a family member, but never arrived. The family quickly notified the authorities of Haynes's disappearance and requested an alert be sent out via television and radio. And I did review another article, guys, and it sounds like that happened. That action was taken. And then this article goes on to say, immediately a woman responded to the state police and identified Sergeant Haynes as a passenger, whom she gave a ride to from Baltimore. According to her account, she dropped him off at the intersection of Route 21 and West Virginia State Route 61 in Oak Hill. Boom, that name again, Oak Hill, before proceeding home. There was another account that was presented to authorities, but the information has been unable to be corroborated. In this story, Haynes was drinking at a local VFW hall when he got into an altercation with three men.
Which is very similar to Slick Gwynn. He was at the VFW and there was three men involved.
According to the witness, they took it outside, this altercation, where the men proceeded to hit Haynes with their car before burying him in a large hollow. A search was conducted where several pieces of evidence were collected, including a wallet, dog tags, and bloody rags, but his family confirmed that those items found did not belong to their missing loved one. The Army officially declared James Lee Haynes as dead in May of 1965, and he was memorialized on May 31st, 1965. His remains have never been located. I was working on a story for True Crime Garage this last couple of weeks where it was a story that's all centered around hitchhiking and a lot of murdered victims who were believed to have last been seen hitchhiking. And so I did a little bit of research on the history of hitchhiking in the United States. And it's interesting that we have early 60s Sergeant James Lee Haynes. He's home, returning home from a tour abroad. And this is an accomplished man. He's an officer. He's an officer. He's an accomplished man, but he's hitchhiking to go see his family for the Christmas season. He's doing that because he doesn't have a vehicle, because he returned home. You know, if you don't have a vehicle when you left or somebody maintains it while you're gone, you don't return to one. And one thing I found when I was doing a brief history on hitchhiking in the United States was that it was actually very popular for servicemen when they would return home to hitchhike, and most folks, most regular upstanding citizens considered it a patriotic duty to give a member of the military a ride anywhere that they wanted it or needed to go. And so while this may seem strange to some folks listening, this was actually very common given the time period.
Yes, but you see them wearing their military get up or fatigues. I mean, it probably feels like a safe person to pick up.
And it seems like back then it was also just so common, period.
Yeah.
People weren't so cautious to do it themselves or to pick up a hitchhiker. And that's definitely a theme through all these stories.
Well,
but again, go ahead, Dick.
I think that it helps ring true the witness's statement, right? Where you're not so suspicious of this witness who's like, yeah, I picked them up. I picked him up somewhere near Baltimore and I transported him to this location. He was alive and well when he got out of my vehicle.
Does it make you wonder if she could have had someone else with her, though? Was she alone when she did that? Did women commonly pick up even military men?
Why else would you join the military, Carolyn?
Yeah.
But no, I think here too, to add a little more credibility to the witness's statement of providing a ride, is that it seems one story that has always stuck with the sergeant here, with the missing sergeant, is this local VFW story where he is in some kind of altercation with 3 other guys. He's outnumbered, and I'm guessing that if being an officer, if he was in uniform, especially if he was in his dress uniform, that he would be fairly easily identifiable to persons later who are coming forward and saying, I think I saw this guy.
And how crazy. It's 3 men again. They're unnamed. Do police reports have their names? 3 men at the VFW hall?
Well, from my understanding, and I don't want to get into it too much because we are going to have some follow-up coverage of this story and dig a little deeper on some of these victims. And from my understanding, that at least one of those 3 guys has been named in some reports.
Did they know? Can you say anything yet? Yeah, I would love to hear what is known about that man.
He was a prominent. He was, from my understanding, he was from a pretty prominent family in the general area where the sergeant is believed to have been last seen at the VFW. And was also known to be a bit of a bully. He liked to start stuff with random people.
Well, and I was trying to find out, but I wonder how close the VFW is to this Route 21 and West Virginia 61. I mean, maybe she dropped him off at the VFW because he's like, hey, that's a place where I can go and get a beer and I'll be welcomed.
That's a good point. Both could be true.
Yeah.
Both stories.
Yeah. I was trying to look it up just to see if I could find out if there's still a VFW hall there. But I mean, that would make a lot of sense if you're coming back from overseas and you're like, that's a place where I know I can be myself and they'll accept me and I can probably get a beer.
Not only that, he needs further transportation. He probably very likely could find, one of his band of brothers to carry him a little bit further down the road.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But you know what? That also makes him quite vulnerable, doesn't it? Like if he's asking around for a ride, or let's say he gets into it with 3 jerks at the bar and they quickly figure out, he's not only is he here by himself, but he has no means of transportation.
Or he walks away and hitchhikes again and somebody else altogether comes across him.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Here's a problem though with this story, and I don't want to try to tear apart every single story that we have because there is so little information on a lot of these, but one of the items that is said to have been collected that in this telling of the story is referred to as pieces of evidence, it is dog tags. Well, they have somebody's name on them and rank on them, from my understanding.
Pretty easy to identify.
They're very specific,
right.
yes.
So it's like, it's like, hey, we found these dog tags. They're pieces of evidence regarding this missing man. And then the family's like, well, those didn't belong to him. It's like, well, then whose name was on them, right? It either had his name or somebody else's name on them.
I mean, unless he was carrying somebody else's dog tags, maybe someone that passed away.
Soldier.
Sometimes they'll say, hey, can you take these back home to my wife or family? I mean, maybe, but I wouldn't think he was in a wartime in the 60s. I mean, they didn't say where he was overseas, so we're kind of,
and the same with the wallet that typically has an ID or something in it that would be identifying too.
Mm-hmm.
That brings us to a gentleman who falls out of chronological order here, and tell us why. Why are we straying from the order that the previous men had gone missing?
So he is believed to be the Mad Butcher's possible first victim. But initially, nobody even realized he was missing. It wasn't until July of 1964 that authorities were even alerted that there was any problem at all. The confusion was that Bob was from Kingston, West Virginia, and in February 1962, he traveled from Chicago, where he was a student. And I read somewhere maybe an electrician student. He came home to see his mother, who was in a nursing home. When he didn't return back home to his house, his family's house from the nursing home, his relatives all just assumed that he must have hitchhiked back to Chicago. And his friends in Chicago, when he didn't arrive back at school, thought he had decided to stay home and wasn't planning on returning school. So because of this confusion, years went by before his family finally realized he was actually missing, and they contacted the state police. By that point, so much time had passed, making the investigation much harder. And if that wasn't confusing enough, in 1965, a relative of one of Bob's coworkers claimed he was alive and well in Chicago. Several news outlets even ran with the story before it was proven to be completely false. So it really leaves you scratching your head. This man vanishes, and instead of alarms being raised, assumptions take over. And if this was, in fact, the Mad Butcher's first victim, if action had been taken sooner, could something have stopped the string of victims that would follow?
This is another article, and it's titled, "Was Feared Butchered Fayette Missing Man Discovered?" State police reported that one of the 6 missing Fayette County men suspected to have been victims of the Mad Butcher is alive and working in Chicago, Illinois. Bob Mac Aggie, 33, is very much alive, according to an investigation conducted by police officials. He has been missing since July 4th, 1962. His whereabouts were learned when relatives of a man working in Chicago said that their kinsman had been working with Aggie. 5 other supposed butcher victims remain to be found. A total of 7 missing persons had at one time been attributed slayings of the butcher. First, and then it goes on to describe some of the different missing persons. But this article says he was found.
Well, I think that was reported a lot, that he was found, but it ended up, and they don't say exactly how or when, but it was proven to be false. He wasn't actually alive and well in Chicago at all.
This is just simply what somebody said, right? It makes its way all the way to the paper where it's presented as fact, and it's really just somebody's misconception of events and probably mistaken identity.
And how many times do you see that, especially in older cases, but really newer cases too? Once it's reported wrong, other news outlets just keep reporting from that over and over and over again until it's widely spread.
It's a lot easier than actually doing your homework.
Yeah.
I do have an article here. We'll get into this at another time. This is talking about potentially 13 victims of the Mad Butcher. And again, though, this just goes to show, as crazy as this idea may sound, this was something that was fairly regularly reported in the newspapers locally in the Beckley, West Virginia area multiple times, a couple times a year over the course of almost a decade, right? From the time that the missing guys start piling up and reporting on this still up until 1969.
I wonder if it ever became bigger than just local. Was it ever reported nationally? You would think pretty quickly this would take off today, but did it ever?
I mean, you would think we would have found a lot more news articles from bigger newspapers. I mean, maybe this was still such a small area where it just was like, well, that's Fayette County. It's pretty small, so we're not going to run that story, even though we got so many people gone missing in like the course of 18 months or less.
Well, it stood the test of time. I'll say that because I found Halloween haunted houses, haunted fields, where even within the last couple of years where they do a theme of the Mad Butcher.
Oh, really?
So it's developed into some kind of urban legend, if you will, folklore, a scary story that's been repeated and told and passed down through not just decades, but generations.
I'll say, I wonder how quick after all this stuff started coming out that hitchhiking declined.
Yeah. Well,
you know, as you're hearing more of these, you're like, maybe, how about I ride my bike? You know,
maybe don't.
Yeah. Like this hitchhiking thing's not working out for a lot of people.
And in many parts of our country, it didn't work out for a lot of female victims, young women, especially in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So to add to some of the speculation, I wanted to make sure we included this here because this is speculation from a member of law enforcement at the height of these disappearances. Sergeant Richardson believes the killer of the three men whose remains have been found probably is or was an Oak Hill resident. The theory is that the killer was known to the victims and could offer rides without arousing suspicion. So they're not including the missing men in that speculation.
It would make sense, especially that they're found in more remote places. The ones that were found in more remote places. Someone would have to know this area, wouldn't you think, to find these locations?
Oh, yeah. I also am curious, not knowing the area, especially 60 years ago. I'm really curious how quickly one could get from what might be described as the center of town to the middle of nowhere. Yeah, I mean, it could, once you're in a vehicle, it could be a matter of 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah, it could be just a few minutes if it's that rural out there.
There was a picture of one, I think the drive-in diner or a restaurant from one of the stories, and it didn't show much of the surroundings, but it kind of gave that impression.
Yeah, I'm picturing that it's pretty rural, and so you maybe have a little downtownish area where those few places are, and then you go out a mile and there's not much.
And really, I bet you it's still like that today. I've driven through there enough where you could be almost anywhere in West Virginia, and in 5-10 minutes you're in the middle of nowhere.
Did you pick up any hitchhikers, Carolyn?
I did not. I'm very glad I didn't.
That's good.
Listen to this article. This one's crazy. It says, Mad Butcher Challenges Law. That's the title, the headline here. It says, the Mad Butcher of Fayette County may have issued a challenge to law enforcement agencies to catch him. A calm male voice called the Ring Register with this question: I would like to know why law in Fayette County has not yet caught the Mad Butcher. I don't believe you can catch me. The local state police headquarters were notified of the call and plan an investigation. The recording of the call is being saved for that purpose, although there is no certain way to tell. The call seemed to have come from a local telephone. Often when calls come from other exchanges, there is a discernible difference in the tone. There was none on this call. If the caller was the Mad Butcher and not a prankster, it is the first known incidence of such a call and the first time he has been in the news since almost a year ago. The last previous instance, according to register files, was on May 19th, 1965, when a skeleton later identified as that of Lewis Bennett of Oak Hill was found near Minden. Bennett, 40 at the time of his disappearance, is one of 6 unsolved area disappearances and deaths, which officers have said could be the work of the mysterious butcher. Bennett had disappeared in 1963. He was last seen leaving an Oak Hill tavern in August of that year.
What do you make of that? Does that sound like most likely that was, I mean, that could have been a teenager even making a joke if this was in the news all the time?
Very likely a prankster. I would put very high percentage that it's a prankster, but and the call's not going into law enforcement. It's going into this ring register. So I did a little searching here. The ring register is something that was advertised in the newspaper regularly. And you could call in to the ring register and ask a question. So I'll tell you exactly what it is. Ring register, and this is their words.
Is this like Google for back in 1963?
I believe so. So it says ring register is a serious service designed to guard your right to know and to be helpful to readers. So it's a service of the newspaper. Ring register at 253-2441 at any time, day or night, except from 10 to 11 a.m., or write to the register when you need information or know of situations that need looking into. So this would be similar to like today, our local news. It's like News 10 on your side or whatever, and then they interview somebody that feels like they were wronged, but they called the newspaper because they couldn't, or the news station because they couldn't get anything done with it.
That makes sense.
But that says call any time of the day or night except 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Otherwise, you could call all 24 hours, 23 hours.
Maybe that's when they had a staff meeting, or it was early lunch.
So your job is to answer the phone and you can ask anything?
You can ask. So I did, and then they print, some of them they would print in the paper. So I found a ring register article where the Mad Butcher was actually referenced. So this is a call that they received on, I don't know when they received the call, but it was printed on June 24th, 1966. And it says, here's the question: is there a reward for information leading to the capture of the Mad Butcher? And also, could you get police protection until he's convicted? Answer: there is a reward of $1,000 offered by the Rotary Clubs of Fayetteville and Oak Hill for information leading to the conviction of the Mad Butcher. Any person with information should contact Sergeant I.P. Richardson of the local detachment of state police. Police protection would be extended according to Richardson. So if you call in and say, I know who the butcher is, I want that $1,000 after you convict the guy, it sounds like they would even give you police protection in the meantime until they could lock him up.
So it's kind of like a hotline.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Not specifically designed for the butcher, but just for general questions. Be sure to join us back here on True Crime Talk for part 2 of The Mad Butcher of West Virginia. Check out my book, available on Amazon, titled The Delphi Murders: The Quest to Find the Man on the Bridge by Nick Edwards, published by Wild Blue Press. Thank you to Carolyn, and thank you to Brian, and all of the fine folks over at Wild Blue Press. But most importantly, thank you for tuning in to True Crime Talk. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and follow True Crime Talk on your listening app, and support True Crime Talk by leaving a positive review so we can keep bringing to you more great True Crime Talk. Thanks for listening.